Okay, so in the previous lesson, you learned all about layers. In this lesson, I want to share with you how to align different layers. Doesn't matter if you're a photographer or graphic designer, at some point, you may need to align different layers with each other depending on the project. If you're a photographer and you're doing a photo collage, you may want to align those photos in a certain way where they align evenly across the top of each other. You may also want to apply an even amount of spacing between each one of those images. And if you're a graphic designer, you may want to align text layers with an image or another graphic along the left edge in order to align them as part of the composition of that file. So you're going to learn how to align different layers. It doesn't matter if it's a text layer, shape layer, a pixel layer, whatever it is, you can align different layers with each other, and you're going to learn how to do that in this lesson. So you can either grab this file to follow along or to use it after you finish this lesson to practice what you've learned. So this particular file has 12 layers. We have our text layers, we have some shape layers, and then we have a couple other layers that are locked and we're not going to use as part of this lesson. So let's say you want to take this text layer and you want to apply it directly in the center of the shape below it. Well, you can grab that layer and manually place it in the center, but it's probably going to drive you nuts trying to figure out if you have this exactly in the center. So there's an easier way to do that. Then maybe you want to take all 5 of these shape layers and you want to align them directly across the top of each other. And again, you can grab each one of these and manually move them. And then you can zoom in to make sure that you've aligned them properly. Again, there's an easier way to do that. All right, so let's say we've centered our text layers directly in the center of each shape, and we've also aligned them exactly across the top. Now, what you want to do is apply the same amount of spacing between each layer. Again, you can grab each layer and try and figure out if they have exactly the same amount of space in between them. Trying to do that is going to drive you crazy. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to use an alignment tool in Photoshop to make this a lot easier for us. So the first thing you want to do is you want to grab your Move tool, which can be accessed via this icon right here or with your keyboard shortcut, which is the letter V. The next thing you want to do is select the layers that you want to align. So we can either grab a layer from here and it will automatically select it if you have Auto Select selected. If not, then it's only going to select the layer that is selected from the layers panel. So if I try and select number 3 or number 4, it's not going to automatically select that layer unless I have Auto Select selected. Then I can grab individual layers without having to come over to the panel over here. Or you can come over to your layers panel and hold down your Control key to select another layer or additional layers. If you want to select all the layers, you can select the top layer, then hold down your Shift key and click on the last layer, and that's going to select all the different layers for you. So let's go ahead and align our numbers directly in the center of each shape. Go ahead and grab the first layer, then hold down your Control key and click on the green shape. Once you do that and you have your Move tool selected, you will then activate the alignment tools, which are located right here. So each one of these icons will align your layers based on the icon that you click on, and there's other icons here as well, and we're going to use those in just a minute. So the first option will align all the layers to the top edges, align them vertical centers, align bottom edges, align left, align horizontal centers, and align right edges. So to center this number directly in the center of the green shape layer, we're going to click on Align Vertical Centers, and then align horizontal centers. And now that layer is perfectly centered within that shape. Let's go ahead and grab our other layers and align those numbers as well. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and group these layers so we can align each one of the shape layers with the text layers along the top and then evenly apply spacing between them. So grab your first two layers, then with your keyboard shortcut, group them, which is Command or Control and the letter G. I'm going to double click on the text here to rename it. I'm just going to give it a 1. And then let's go ahead and group the rest of the layers as well. Okay, let's go ahead and align them to the top edge. The first thing we have to do is select all the layers. So in order to select them all, we have to select the first layer, hold down our Shift key, and click on the last. Now all of them are selected. So what we're going to do is select Align to Top Edges, and what it's going to do is align all the layers to the topmost layer. And just like that, everything is perfectly aligned. If we undo that with Command or Control and the letter Z and select Align to Bottom Edges, it's going to align to the layer closest to the bottom, which is the number 5 layer, and perfectly align them down here. Okay, now we're going to apply an even amount of spacing between each layer. Once you have multiple layers selected, you get new options, which are these options right here, which will distribute the space between the different layers. We can distribute that space to the top edges, vertical centers, bottom edges, left, horizontal centers, and right edges. So what we're going to do for this particular set of layers is to distribute the space between them with this option right here, which is horizontal centers. Once you click on it, it will then automatically apply the same amount of spacing between each one of the layers. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and zoom out with my zoom tool, which is the letter Z. I'm going to select my number 5 layer. With my move tool, I'm going to click and drag to the right. Now here's another quick tip. As you're moving, you can move it anywhere you want, but if you want to make sure that that layer is perfectly aligned in the same position and doesn't move up or down, hold down your Shift key and then you can't move it up or down. So with my Shift key, I can move it to the right. I'm going to go ahead and click on the number 1 layer, hold down my Shift key and move it to the left, and now we can evenly distribute the spacing between them again based on the new positions of our end layers. Select all the layers and click on the horizontal distribute via centers, and we get a new set of spacing which is much wider than it was before. So keep in mind your outer layers are the anchors for the distribution, and then the layers in between them will be distributed evenly based on the location of these 2 layers. Okay, let me share with you a couple other tips and also a real-world example of how you might want to use your alignment tools for a particular project. So I'm going to go ahead and deselect all of these by just clicking anywhere on my document. And another thing I want to show you is how to select multiple layers without using your layers panel, and that's simply by clicking and dragging your mouse over the layers that you want to select. And you can see in the layers panel, I have the first 3 layers selected, and I love using this option to select multiple layers directly on my document without having to come over here to make those selections. Now I do have another file here. This is a brochure. And let's say you're creating a brochure for your photography business or your graphic design business, and you want to align your new text layers with each other. You can simply click and drag out to select those layers and then use your alignment tools to align the text. Now, the one thing to keep in mind is if your background layer is not locked, then when you go to select your layers, you're going to end up selecting your background layer as well, and then you're going to end up aligning your text with that background layer. So make sure you have any layers that you don't want to align to locked so that it's not selected when you select them directly on the document. Over here, we can also align our text evenly in the center by using our marquee tool. So here I have a little text box. I can apply my guidelines to the edges of that box. And then if I select my marquee tool with the letter M, I can click and drag out the width of that box. And then I can select my layer that I want to center within it. And with my move tool selected, I get the options to align, and then it will align within the center of that marquee. So just for an example, if I move my marquee tool over here and then realign it, it will center based on where that new marquee tool is. So you can use your marquee tool as well as a means for aligning different layers. So let's go ahead and add our marquee tool again. And then if you want to select the layers directly from the document, because maybe you have too many layers to actually locate it from over here, hold down your control key and then click on that layer. You'll get a pop-up menu with different layer names, and then it will highlight the one that you clicked on. Once you click on that layer there, it will select it in the layers panel, and then you can use your alignment tools. But right now it's grayed out, and that's because this layer is locked. And when you try to unlock it, you can't, and that's because it's in a grouped layer, which is locked. Once you unlock that grouped layer, then you have access to that layer, and then you can align it. So let's go ahead and grab our other layers. I'm going to click on this. And sometimes when you try and select a layer, it's not always going to allow you to select it because it's not really picking up that layer within the marquee. So you may have to come over to the layers panel and select it to align it. So there you go. Those are some different ways to align your different layers and a real world example of how and when you may want to align your layers. So go ahead and grab both of these files and practice what you've learned, and then we'll move on to the next lesson, which is all about learning how to stack, copy, and delete your layers. Hello and welcome back. In this lesson, I'm going to share with you some more tips and techniques for working with your layers. We're going to talk about how to stack your layers, how it affects your artwork, how to duplicate your layers, and then we're going to also talk about how to delete them as well. First, let's take a look at stacking layers. Again, if you want to follow along or practice when you're finished with this lesson, you can grab this file from the resources folder or directly from this lesson. So right now we have 5 grouped layers, and each is overlapping the one below it. And this is based on the stacking order of the layers. And as you know from previous lessons, we can rearrange the individual layers to overlap or stack on top of other layers based on the order that layer is within the layers panel. So now we have the group 2 layer above everything else, and then we can put it at the very bottom, and then it will be below every other layer. Now here's another quick tip for rearranging your layers. If you're having a hard time dragging and placing them into the location where you want them, because maybe they're getting nested into other group layers, what you can do instead is use keyboard shortcuts to move the layers up or down. So the keyboard shortcuts is the Command or Control key and the left bracket key to move it down and the right bracket key to move it up. Now let me show you a couple of different ways to duplicate your layers. One way is to click on the layer that you want to duplicate and drag it down to this little icon right next to the trash can, and that will duplicate the layer for you. The option that I prefer, which is much faster, is a keyboard shortcut, which is Command or Control and the letter J, and that will give you a duplicate layer. Another option for duplicating a layer is to click on the layer that you want to duplicate while holding down your keyboard shortcut, which is the Alt or Option key. And then you're going to notice that your Move tool icon is going to change to a black and white arrow, and that lets you know you're in the duplicate mode. And when you click on a layer and drag it out, you will get a duplicate of that layer. You also want to make sure that you have Auto Select selected along with Group if you're trying to duplicate groups. If not, if you just select Layer, then it's going to just duplicate that layer and not the grouped items within it. So this time we only duplicated the green shape and not the green shape and the number. So let's go back to Group and try it again. I'm holding down my Alt or Option key. I'm going to click on the green shape and pull it out. And now I have two duplicates, one with the shape and a number, and then another one without the number. Now that I've made a mess of my document, I want to clean it back up by deleting my layers that I just duplicated. And to do that, I'm going to make sure that the layer that I want to delete is selected, and then I'm going to come down here and select the delete icon layer. And then it's going to ask me if I want to delete just the group only or the group and the contents. If I do just group only, it's going to ungroup it but keep the contents. Group and contents is going to delete everything. So let's go ahead and select this option, and then that item is deleted. We're going to do the same thing with this one, but this time I'm going to select my delete key to delete that layer. Now if you're on a PC, you probably don't have a delete key, so in that case you're going to want to use your backspace key. Go ahead and delete this one as well. And that's how you stack, organize, duplicate, and delete layers. Hello and welcome to the final lesson on the introductory to layers. So in this lesson, I just want to briefly emphasize something that we've talked about previously, and that is organizing your individual layers, either by naming the layers or by grouping them, or both. So it doesn't matter if you're a graphic designer or a photographer. As you work on your projects, you're going to be adding more and more layers, and it just makes it so much easier for your workflow if you name your layers according to what that layer is all about, as well as categorizing or naming your grouped layers based on the contents within it. So here we have a web design project that is part of this course, and there are tons and tons of different types of layers within it. And as you can see, I've named them accordingly based on what that content is, as well as the grouped content. So I highly recommend getting into the habit of naming your layers based on what that particular layer is all about. If you're using adjustment layers to edit images, you want to name that layer based on what that adjustment layer is. So if we add an adjustment layer to this particular image here, and it's a levels 1, I may want to rename that image 6 levels adjustment or something along those lines. That way I know if I need to find that particular layer, I can locate it with my search option up here via name, or worst case scenario, I can search by the type of layer. So that is it on the introductory of layers. If you have any questions about layers, please post them in the Q&A section, and I'd be happy to answer your questions as soon as possible. Thanks for listening, and have an awesome day. Hello and welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to go over layer styles, which are another element to layers that will allow you to customize the layers and the elements and the graphics or the text within that layer to style it and do different things to it. So for example, I have some text here. We can add a drop shadow to it. We can add a bevel and emboss. We can add a stroke, inner shadow, inner glow, satin, gradient overlay, pattern overlay, and an outer glow. So there's a lot of different styles that you can apply to the text and shapes and other things like that. So if I create a shape here, and if I want to add a drop shadow to it, all I have to do is double click on the shape layer, and then I will get the layer style dialog panel, and then I can choose from these style options over here on the left side to customize that shape or the text or whatever it is I want to add the style to. Then within the drop shadow, we have other options. We can change the opacity of that drop shadow, how far away it is from the object, the spread, in other words, how much it spreads out so it makes it smoother along the edges, and then the size of that drop shadow as well to blur it out or smooth it out even further. And there's other options as well. So we're not going to go through and explain every single one of these layer styles. Instead, what I would like you to do is grab this layer style PSD file that is attached to this lesson and play around with the different layer styles. So you can turn on or turn off these layer styles just like you can the layers in general by turning on or turning off this eye icon next to each one of the layer styles. You can also go back into that layer panel either by double clicking on the layer or the effects menu right here. And if I double click on that, it brings back that layer style panel so that you can customize it. So go ahead, download this file, play around with the layer styles, and that's the best way to learn how to use the layer styles to get the effects that you want to use. All right, so that's it for layer styles. In the next lesson, we're going to take a look at the type tool. All right, so for this lesson, we are going to take a look at our text tool, and we're going to go over some of the basics. So go ahead and create a new document from here, or use your keyboard shortcut, Command or Control and the letter N. Go ahead and give your document a name, and then just size it to whatever you want. I'm going to use 1600 by 900 with a resolution of 300 and a white background. All right, so to access your text tool, you can come over here to your tool panel and select it from here, or you can use your keyboard shortcut, which is the letter T. So up here, we can make our selections for our font. We can choose the type of font, the style of the font, whether it's regular, bold, or even italic, and that's going to all depend on the particular font that you have installed. So this font here has a lot more style options available versus the last one I selected. We can also select the font size from here, or we can type in a number in this box if we want a larger or a specific size font. This is for anti-aliasing, so I typically just keep it at crisp, but you do have other options depending on the project that you're working on. If you're working in paragraphs, or if you have a lot of text and you want to align left, center, or right, you can do so with these three options, but it's mostly for paragraphs. We can also change our color of our font by clicking on this little color box here. You're going to get your color picker dialog box, select your color, click OK, and then it's going to update that color in this box so you know what color you're working with. This option here is grayed out, and that's because we don't have any text selected, but when you do, you'll have an option to warp your text. We also have an icon here that will allow you to customize your text even further. You can adjust your characters as well as make other options for paragraphs. So if I click on this, I'm going to get two little panels here, and your panels may actually show up over here on the right side if you've never used them before. I've used these before, and I just like to have these two particular windows floating over my document so I have easy access to them as I'm working. So you can see here in the character panel, we do have some of the same tool options as we do up here, but there are other options as well to allow us to customize our text. And then the same with the paragraph option here. We have these three alignment options up here, but we also have a justify option here that's not available up here, as well as options to indent our paragraphs to style it even more. So these are all options to help you customize your text based on the project that you're working on. You can also access these panels from your window menu up here. We have character here, paragraph here, and you can always close these panels by pressing on this little X right here. So let's go ahead and add some text. Grab your text tool with the letter T and then just click on your document, and then you're going to get this blinking line here, and that lets you know you can begin adding text. So right now my text is fairly large because I used 150 points in my last project. So I can just double click on my text to select all of it, or I can go up to select and select all, and that's going to select all the text. We also have a keyboard shortcut here for that as well. So once you have all your text selected, you can come up here and change the font size to whatever you want, and like I mentioned before, you can type in a number as well. Now to get out of this text box, we have to come over here and click on our text layer or any other layer. We can then move that text in our document by grabbing our Move tool from right over here in our tool panel, or by clicking the letter V for our keyboard shortcut. So I'm just going to move it to here so we can take a better look at this text and see some of the other options that we have. So I'm going to grab my text tool again with the letter T. I'm going to select all with Command or Control and the letter A, and that's only selecting the document. So we have these dancing ants around the document. I wanted to select the text. Well, so in order to do that, you first need to activate the text box by clicking on the inside of it. And then you can use Command or Control and A to select all, or just double click to select all. All right, so if we come up here to our character panel and our paragraph panel, we can make adjustments to this text. We can add an underline to it if we want. We can put a strike through. We can make it bold. So play around with these different options to see what you can do with it, as well as some of these other options as well. We have options to increase or decrease the spacing between the text, and that's known as tracking. So if you want to do something like that, you can, and that will allow you to customize your text even more. There's other options here as well, so go ahead and play around with those. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at how to add paragraphs to our document. So I'm going to grab some dummy text here, and to add a paragraph, instead of clicking and releasing, we're going to click and hold our left mouse button and drag out, and then you get this little box with these dashed lines. So this is our paragraph box. So right now I have my text aligned to the right, and that's why I have my cursor over here to the right versus the left. So I'm going to click on left align, moves over. I'm going to go ahead and adjust my text size to 12 points, and then I'm going to paste the text that I copied from a different document by going up to Edit and selecting Paste. Here's the keyboard shortcut, which is Command or Control and the letter V. And it applies that text based on the last options selected and not the text that I grabbed from my web browser. Now, if I had selected this text from a different document that had text styled differently, different color, different font size, etc., then it will apply those styles to the text. So I need to select all, Command or Control and A to select all, and then I can adjust the font to exactly what I need for this particular paragraph. So I'm just going to make some adjustments to it and change the color as well. Now we do have a little icon right here at the bottom right that gives us some information about this particular paragraph. We can see that it's different than the other boxes here. The other ones have nothing inside. This one has like a little cross or a little plus sign, and that lets us know there's more information inside of this text box. So if I click right here on this box and drag it down, we're going to have additional text visible now versus before because it's being cut off at the bottom of this dashed line right here. And we can see that icon is still there, and that's just letting us know there's still more text there. So you have to increase your box in order to make all of it visible, or change the font size. So if I go back and select all and choose a 6-point font, then that little icon disappears and lets us know there is no more text. Everything is now visible. We can also come in here, click and drag to select a line of text, so we can style that text differently from all the other text. All right, so that's it for Text 101. That gives you the basics of how to add text, how to style it, and how to add paragraphs. So go ahead, play around with the text tool, add some text, create some paragraphs, color it, resize it, and that's the best way to learn how to use this particular tool, and then you can start creating what you need for the projects that you're working on. In the next lesson, we're going to go over our selection tools. We're going to go over the basics, and I'm going to share with you these different selection tools that are going to be an integral part of your Photoshop journey. You're going to need to learn how to use these tools to retouch your images and much more. So we're going to go over the basics of the selection tools in the next lesson. Another tool we're going to use a lot when creating websites is our shape tool, which is located right here on our toolbar. If we click on this and hold down our mouse button, we're going to see 6 shape tools from which to choose from. The ones that I use the most are the rectangle and the rounded rectangle tool. And then occasionally I'll use the ellipse tool, and the line tool I'll use for creating a divider between the different sections of a website. So to create a shape, we just click and drag out, and we'll get a blue outline showing what that shape is going to look like. Once we release our mouse button, it is then filled in with a color based on the tool options up here. So from here, I can come up here and click on this color box to choose a different color for that particular shape. And if I want, I can add a stroke to it as well. I can increase the size of that stroke, and I can also style it based on the different options in here as well. If we want to change the size of the particular shape that we created, we can type in new dimensions here to create a new shape based on those dimensions. So for example, if you want a square, you can type in the exact dimensions for that shape to get that shape. Another way to create a perfect square is to hold down our Shift key and then drag out that shape to the size that we want. Once we release our mouse button and the Shift key, we get our square. But the only problem is, if you had a shape layer selected that you created previously, it's going to add that shape into the same layer. In order to create a new square on a different layer, we have to come down here and create a new layer by clicking on this icon. And then when we hold down our Shift key, it will then place that new shape on its own layer. And the reason why is when you have a shape that you created selected in the layers panel and you hold down the Shift key, you can see that the icon is changing with a plus sign on the bottom. If I hold down my Alt or Option key, it changes to a minus sign. And that's because we have some options up here to combine shapes or subtract from shapes, and 2 other options as well. So you're basically adding a new shape to that layer when you hold down your Shift key. Now, when it comes to our ellipse tool, we can create an oval shape. And to make a perfectly round circle, we need to hold down our Shift key. But first, let's go ahead and create a new layer so it goes on its own layer. And then I can click, drag out, hold down my Shift key, and then I'll get a perfect circle. All right, so that's it for our shape tool. We will be using the shape tool a lot when we design our websites in the advanced section. So I'll provide some additional tips and techniques on using the shape tool in upcoming lessons.